The Betazoid attack. Human nuclear warheads exploded against the hulls of Betazoid warships, blasting open the alien metal and sucking thousands of Betazoid warriors into the silent void of space. Fleet Commander Joseph Simpson watched the flashes of destruction on the screen. It was 2487, and humanity had spread among the stars for centuries. But not all aliens welcomed humans in peace. The ruthless Betazoids had attacked human colonies, slaughtering families from orbit. Today, humanity struck back. I am Joseph Simpson, Fleet Commander of Earth Defense. Joseph began, addressing his crew. The Betazoid attacks left our outer settlements in ruins. Debris fields of human stations and gruesome images of destroyed escape pods float on our screens. Betazoid leader Quasar has declared humans unfit to exist beside his warrior race. Earth's best scientists reverse-engineered Betazoid tech from fallen ships, and High Command has given me the order: take the fight to Betazoid space, hit them at home. Joseph scratched his beard, watching the nuclear explosions pop around his fleet. Direct hits, he shouted, his voice filled with determination. His human crews worked in frantic, organized chaos to reload torpedoes into tubes. Betazoid energy beams sliced one of the human frigates in half. The Betazoids adapted to human weapons fast. Another Betazoid ship, shaped like a dark arrowhead, warped in behind the fleet. It eclipsed the stars, dwarfing their ships. All ships, fire on the big one. Launch all nukes. Joseph commanded, gripping the console. Sweat beaded on his forehead, and his heart felt like a war drum in his chest. If this attack failed, Earth had no more ships to stop the Betazoids. They would bomb humanity back to the Stone Age from orbit. Humanity's existence among the stars hung on this battle. The Betazoid warship loomed. Their torpedoes raced toward it. Joseph's fingers trembled as they tapped across the screen. Fire all torpedoes now. Everything we've got, he shouted to his weapons officer. Joseph held his breath as the torpedoes raced toward the massive Betazoid dreadnought. They had them now. But before their torpedoes could connect, the hulking ship disappeared into hyperspace with a flash. Their warheads detonated in empty vacuum. Joseph slammed his fist down. Damn it. They jumped, tracked their hyperspace signature. We're going after them. They won't get away from us that easy. He ordered his navigator to punch the coordinates into their hyperdrives. The Betazoid warship was heading right for the Vega system, one of their core worlds. Joseph gritted his teeth as their ship accelerated into the swirling blue vortex of hyperspace. His crew looked to him with silent questions. They knew, as well as he did, that this was likely a one-way trip. The Betazoids were leading them right to the heart of their empire, but they couldn't let them escape. This was their chance to strike a decisive blow, to make them pay for every human life they had taken. Hours passed as they hurtled through the void. The tension on the bridge was palpable. Joseph's sensor officer's brow furrowed as his screen beeped. "Sir, I'm picking up a distress signal. It's coming from a nearby star system." Joseph walked over to look at his display. The signal was weak, but it was there and coming from a star system directly in their path. He rubbed his chin, a war raging in his own mind. They had their orders. They had to complete their mission. But whoever was sending that signal needed help. And wasn't that what they were fighting for? To protect the innocent from the Betazoid's cruelty. Joseph sighed and made his choice. Drop us out of hyperspace. We're investigating that signal. His helmsman nodded and cut the hyperdrive. The blue tunnel collapsed into star lines, then resolved into a vista of space and destruction. Before them was a planet, its surface scarred by bombardment. Betazoid ships swarmed around it like angry wasps, but they weren't the ones firing. They were being fired upon. Strange, angular ships darted among the Betazoid fleet, unleashing volleys of searing energy beams. The Betazoid ships returned fire, but they were outmatched. Whoever this new race was, their technology was beyond anything Joseph had ever seen. One of the alien ships, a massive dagger-shaped battleship, sliced a Betazoid cruiser in half with a single shot. Joseph's science officer spoke up, his voice shaking. "Sir, I've identified the attacking ships. They match the profile of a species known as the Zorgon. Highly advanced, highly aggressive. They've enslaved a dozen races in the Gamma Quadrant." Joseph watched the carnage unfold on the view screen, his mind reeling. The Betazoids, the scourge of humanity, the monsters he had come to destroy, were being slaughtered. Despite everything they had done to humans, he couldn't help but feel a twinge of sympathy. They were outmatched, just as humanity had been. In that moment, Joseph made a decision that would change everything. He opened a comm channel to the fleet. "This is Fleet Commander Simpson. All ships, engage the Zorgon fleet. Defend the Betazoids. I repeat, defend the Betazoids." Shocked silence greeted his order. Then one by one, his captains acknowledged. Their ships swung into formation, aligning themselves with the battered Betazoid fleet. Their weapons powered up, locking onto Zorgon ships. Joseph almost laughed at the absurdity of it. Here they were, ready to fight and die alongside their greatest enemy. But in the face of this new threat, old hatred seemed petty. The Zorgons would enslave them all if they won today. Human, Betazoid, it didn't matter. Today, they were allies. Unlikely allies. The Zorgon ships turned toward the human Betazoid alliance, their weapons glowing with deadly energy. Joseph gripped the arms of his chair, his heart pounding. All ships, fire at will. Let's show these Zorgon bastards what humans and Betazoids can do together. The human fleet and the Betazoid ships fought together, human and alien crews working as one to hold back the Zorgon onslaught. But even their combined strength was being pushed to its limits. The Zorgon flagship, a massive dreadnought bristling with weapons, cut through their forces like a hot knife through butter. Its advanced shields shrugged off their most powerful attacks. Joseph gripped the armrests of his command chair, his knuckles turning white. They were losing ships fast, human and Betazoid alike. At this rate, there would be nothing left of either of their fleets. His mind raced, trying to find a solution, a weakness to exploit. Then it hit him. The flagship. It was the key. Take that out, and the Zorgon fleet would be thrown into disarray. But how? Their weapons couldn't scratch it. It would take a miracle. Suddenly, alarms blared on the bridge. Collision alert. His tactical officer shouted. Joseph whipped his head around to see a damaged Betazoid fighter trailing smoke and sparks, hurtling straight toward their view screen. Brace for impact. He yelled, gripping his chair, but at the last second, the fighter veered away, missing them by mere meters. As it passed, Joseph caught a glimpse of the pilot through the cockpit canopy. His eyes widened. It was Quasar, the Betazoid leader himself. A burst of static came over the comm. "Commander Simpson," Quasar's voice crackled, strained but determined. "It seems I owe you my thanks. Your intervention saved many Betazoids today." Joseph almost couldn't believe what he was hearing. Quasar, thanking the human. But he pushed his surprise aside. There were more pressing matters. "Don't mention it," he replied gruffly. "But we've got a bigger problem. That flagship is tearing us apart. We need to take it down." There was a pause, then Quasar spoke again. "Agreed. I have a plan, but it will require cooperation between our forces. A joint strike team to board the dreadnought and destroy it from within." Joseph hesitated for only a moment. The idea of working side by side with Betazoids after all the blood that had been spilled between their races was almost unthinkable. But then he looked at the view screen, at the Zorgon ships pressing their attack, and he knew Quasar was right. Divided, they would fall. But together, they might have a chance. "I'm in," Joseph said. "Let's do this." Minutes later, Joseph was leading a mixed team of human and Betazoid soldiers through the corridors of the Zorgon flagship, the hull shuddering around them from the battle raging outside. Quasar was at his side, his plasma rifle spitting fire as they cut down Zorgon troops. It was surreal, fighting alongside the being who had been his nemesis for so long. But in the heat of battle, Their differences seemed to melt away. They were soldiers, warriors, united by a common cause. They fought their way to the reactor core, planting explosive charges on the pulsing heart of the dreadnought. As they made their way back to their boarding craft, the ship shook with internal detonations, the Zorgon in disarray as their flagship tore itself apart from within. In the chaos of their escape, as human and Betazoid ships pulled away from the dying Zorgon dreadnought, Joseph found himself reflecting on the strange turns life can take. Yesterday, he would have given anything to see Quasar and his kind wiped from the stars. But today, he had fought by his side, trusted him with his life. War makes for strange bedfellows, they say. But perhaps there's more that unites us than divides us. Perhaps, in the face of a greater threat, even the oldest of enemies can find common ground. The Zorgon flagship exploded behind them, a brilliant flash of light that filled the view screen. Cheers erupted on the bridge. Human and Betazoid voices joined in celebration. Joseph looked to Quasar, meeting his gaze across the chaos. He nodded to Joseph, a gesture of respect, of acknowledgement. There would be much to discuss in the days ahead, treaties to be negotiated, wounds to be healed. But for now, in this moment of victory, Joseph allowed himself a smile. They had done the impossible today, not as humans or Betazoids, but as something more. As allies and as friends. The battle still raged around them, Zorgon ships reeling but not yet defeated. They had struck a blow, but the war was far from over. Joseph turned back to his crew, his resolve hardened by the challenges they had faced and overcome. "All right, people, let's finish this," he said, his voice ringing with newfound determination. "We've got a galaxy to save." The bioweapon. As the remains of the Zorgon flagship drifted in the void, Joseph allowed himself a moment of relief. The tide had turned. The Zorgon were in disarray, their fleets scattering. But even as cheers rang out across the bridge, a chill ran down Joseph's spine. Something was wrong. On the view screen, the surface of the Betazoid colony was changing. A sickly green haze was spreading across the cities, the forests, the plains. People were stumbling in the streets, collapsing, their bodies twisting in agony. "What the hell is happening down there?" Joseph demanded, his voice tight. It was Quasar who answered, his face ashen. "It's a bioweapon," he said, his voice shaking. "The Zorgon, they must have released it as a last resort. It's killing my people." Joseph stared at the screen, horror and realization dawning in equal measure. He had seen this before. Decades ago, the Zorgons had used a similar weapon against human colonies. The death toll had been catastrophic. We have no defense against this," Quasar said, his usual bravado gone. "Our medical technology is not advanced enough." Joseph closed his eyes, the weight of a decision pressing down on him. When he opened them, they were filled with resolve. "We do," he said quietly. "Humanity developed a cure after the Zorgons used this against us. It was costly, but we have it." Quasar looked at him, hope and disbelief warring in his eyes. You would share this with us, after everything." Joseph nodded. "No one deserves this, not even our enemies." The conversation with Earth's leaders was tense. There were those who argued against helping the Betazoids, who saw this as a chance to let a hated enemy perish. But Joseph argued passionately, his conviction unwavering. This was about more than politics, more than war. This was about life, about the basic decency that separated them from the monsters they fought. In the end, the decision was made. The cure would be shared. Human medical ships descended on the Betazoid colony, working side by side with Betazoid doctors to distribute the life-saving treatment. Joseph watched from orbit as the green haze slowly dissipated, as people stopped dying in the streets. It was a strange feeling, to know that they had saved the lives of those they had once sought to destroy. But as Joseph watched human and Betazoid working together, he felt a glimmer of hope. If they could do this, if they could put aside their differences in the face of a greater crisis, perhaps there was a chance for peace after all. The battle still raged in the skies above. The Zorgans, even in their defeat, fought on with desperate ferocity. But for a moment, Joseph allowed himself to believe that this could be a turning point, not just in the war, but in the history of their species. He turned back to his crew, to Quasar at his side. There was still work to be done, still a fight to be won. But for now, they had shown that compassion could be a weapon as powerful as any laser or torpedo. The Zorgan ships regrouped, preparing for another assault. Joseph straightened in his chair, his resolve hardened by the challenges they had faced, the choices they had made. "All right, people," he said, his voice ringing with determination. "Let's finish this fight." But even as the words left his mouth, a new alarm sounded on the bridge. "Commander," his security officer shouted, "intruder alert on the Betazoid colony. Zorgan infiltration team detected." Joseph's blood ran cold. How had they slipped past their defenses? He turned to Quasar, but the Betazoid leader was already rising from his seat, his face a mask of fury. "They're going after our leaders," Quasar growled, "trying to hit us while we're vulnerable." Joseph was about to respond when a new message flashed across his screen. His eyes widened in shock as he read the words. "Quasar, they've taken Quasar. The infiltration team. They have him." For a moment, the bridge was silent. Then, slowly, Joseph rose from his chair. "Prep a shuttle," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "I'm going after him." His crew stared at him in disbelief. "Sir, you can't," his first officer protested. "We need you here, commanding the fleet." But Joseph shook his head. "Quasar risked his life to fight beside us. I'm not abandoning him to the Zorgan." He turned, meeting the eyes of each of his bridge officers in turn. "I'm leaving you in command. Keep our people safe." With that, he strode from the bridge, a hand-picked team of human and Betazoid soldiers falling into step behind him. They boarded a shuttle, rocketing down towards the surface of the Betazoid moon, where Quasar's tracking signal had last been detected. As they approached the coordinates, Joseph's eyes narrowed. A Zorgan base, hidden beneath the moon's rocky surface. "Bring us in low," he ordered the pilot. "We'll jump from here." The shuttle swooped down, hovering just meters above the ground. Joseph and his team leaped out, weapons at the ready, as they stormed towards the base's entrance. Zorgan guards opened fire, energy bolts sizzling through the air. But Joseph's team was quick and lethal. They cut through the defenses, fighting their way into the heart of the base. As they raced through the corridors, alarms blaring all around them, they came to a sudden halt. Before them stood a towering Zorgan warrior, his armor gleaming in the dim light. "I am Xylo," he snarled, his voice dripping with menace. "And you, Commander, have made a grave mistake." Joseph raised his rifle, but Xylo was faster. He lunged forward, knocking the weapon from Joseph's hands and slamming him against the wall. They grappled in close quarters, trading blows with brutal force. But even as he fought, Joseph's mind was racing. Why had the Zorgan taken Quasar? What did they want with him? The answer came as they burst into the base's central chamber. Joseph's eyes widened in horror. Betazoid prisoners, strapped to examination tables, their bodies twisted and deformed. Zorgan scientists hovered over them, taking samples, making notes. "You're experimenting on them," Joseph gasped, realization dawning. "Trying to unlock the secrets of their physiology." Xylo laughed, a cruel, grating sound. "The Betazoids are the key to our victory," he sneered. "Their DNA, combined with our technology, will create a new breed of soldier. Unstoppable. Invincible." Rage surged through Joseph's veins. He launched himself at Xylo, all thoughts of guns and tactics forgotten. This was primal, a battle of strength and will. They crashed through the chamber, smashing equipment, trading blows that would have shattered bone. But Joseph fought with the fury of a man possessed. For every punch Xylo landed, Joseph returned two in kind. And then, with a final, desperate effort, Joseph had the Zorgan pinned, His hands wrapped around Xylo's throat, squeezing, until finally the Zorgon went limp. Joseph staggered back, chest heaving, knuckles bruised and bloody. But he had no time to rest. He could hear Quasar's voice, weak but alive, calling out from a nearby cell. He raced over, wrenching open the door. Quasar looked up at him, battered and bruised, but alive. "Joseph," he rasped, you came for me." Joseph helped him to his feet, supporting his weight. "I couldn't leave you behind," he said simply. "Not after everything." Quasar's eyes met his, a newfound respect glimmering within. "I was wrong about you," he said softly. "About humanity. I see that now." Together, they limped out of the cell, Joseph calling for his team to regroup. They had to get out of there, had to destroy this place and all its horrors. They moved through the base, planting explosives as they went. The Zorgon scientists fled, their grotesque experiments abandoned in the chaos. The Alliance for Peace Sky. Joseph helped Quasar into the waiting shuttle, then turned to look back at the smoking ruins. So much had changed, he reflected, in such a short time. The lines between enemy and friend, between right and wrong, had blurred and shifted. But one thing was clear. In this moment, watching the Zorgon base burn, Quasar at his side, he knew he had made the right choice. The shuttle lifted off, carrying them up and away from the moon's surface. Joseph sat back in his seat, exhaustion finally taking hold. But even as his eyes drifted closed, a small smile played across his lips. They had struck a blow against the Zorgons today, had shown that even the most bitter of enemies could find common ground. It was a strange journey that had brought him here, from soldier to commander, from enemy to rescuer. But as the shuttle soared through the stars, carrying him back to his ship and his crew, Joseph knew one thing for certain. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever battles remained to be fought, he would face them head-on. For his people, for his newfound allies, for the future they would build together. With the Zorgon base reduced to smoldering rubble, and Quasar safe from their clutches, Joseph allowed himself a moment to breathe. But there was little time to rest. The war still raged among the stars, and the alliance between humans and Betazoids was tenuous at best. That's why, when the Betazoid High Council extended an invitation for Joseph and a delegation of human leaders to visit their homeworld, he knew he had to accept. This was a chance to forge a lasting peace, to build a future where their races could stand together against the threats that lurked in the galaxy. Joseph stepped off the shuttle onto the surface of the Betazoid homeworld, a planet of towering spires and gleaming cities. He was greeted by Quasar himself, who clasped his hand in a firm grip. "Welcome, Commander Simpson," Quasar said, his voice resonating with newfound respect. "Let us hope that this visit marks the beginning of a new era for both our peoples." The negotiations were tense, the weight of centuries of conflict hanging heavy in the air. But Quasar emerged as a surprising advocate for peace, his words passionate and persuasive. "We have seen what we can achieve when we stand together," he argued, his eyes locking with those of the human delegates. "The Zorgon nearly destroyed us both. Only in unity can we hope to survive." But even as progress was made, Joseph couldn't shake a sense of unease. He noticed the glares of some Betazoid generals, the whispered conversations that ceased when he drew near. And then, in a moment of chaos, everything changed. Alarms blared through the council chambers. Betazoid soldiers, led by a fierce warrior named Korax, stormed in, weapons drawn. They seized the High Council members, holding them at gunpoint. "Collaborating with humans is a weakness," Korax bellowed, his eyes blazing with fury. "The Betazoids are meant to conquer, to rule. We will not bow to this false peace." Joseph's mind raced, years of tactical training kicking into gear. He couldn't let this happen, couldn't let the fragile peace they had worked so hard to build be shattered. He caught Quasar's eye across the room, saw the same determination mirrored there. With a barely perceptible nod, they sprang into action. Joseph and a group of loyal Betazoid soldiers, who had anticipated such treachery, launched a daring counterstrike. They crept through service tunnels and ventilation shafts, closing in on the council chambers from all sides. At Joseph's signal, they burst in, weapons ready. But Joseph held up a hand, staying their trigger fingers. He stepped forward, locking eyes with Korax. "Is this what Betazoid strength looks like?" he asked, his voice ringing through the chamber. "Threatening your own leaders? Clinging to a war that will destroy us all?" He saw doubt flicker in the eyes of some of Korax's followers. He pressed on, his words passionate and unyielding. "True strength lies in cooperation, in understanding, in building a future together, not tearing each other apart." For a long, tense moment, the room was silent. Then, slowly, Korax's followers began to lower their weapons. Korax himself stood rigid, his face twisted with rage. But he was alone now, his coup crumbling around him. Betazoid security forces flooded in, securing the room and taking Korax into custody. Joseph let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. As the council members were freed and order was restored, Joseph couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought them here. Months ago, he had seen the Betazoids as nothing more than enemies to be destroyed. But now, he had stood side by side with them, had fought for a shared future. It was a powerful reminder, he thought, of the importance of diplomacy, of the need to build bridges even with those we once called enemies. For in a galaxy filled with threats, with Zorgans and others who would see them all conquered, strength could only be found in unity. The peace talks resumed, the shock of the attempted coup galvanizing both sides. Agreements were reached, treaties signed. A new chapter was beginning, one of cooperation and shared purpose. As Joseph boarded the shuttle back to his ship, Quasar clasped his shoulder. "You have shown me the true meaning of strength today, Commander," he said solemnly. "I will not forget it." Joseph nodded, a smile touching his lips. "Nor will I forget what we have achieved here. Let it be the foundation of a lasting peace." The shuttle lifted off, carrying Joseph back to the stars, back to the war that still raged. But he carried with him a new hope, a belief that even the deepest of divides could be bridged. For in the end, they were all part of the same galaxy, all facing the same threats, and only together could they hope to overcome them. The Zorgan invasion. As the ink dried on the historic alliance between humans and Betazoids, Joseph allowed himself a moment of hope. The war had taken a heavy toll on both their peoples, but perhaps now, united, they could forge a path towards lasting peace. That hope was shattered mere days later. Joseph was jolted awake by the blare of alarms, red lights flashing across his quarters. He barely had time to throw on his uniform before his comm crackled to life. "Commander Simpson to the bridge. We're under attack." He raced through the corridors, crew members rushing past him to their battle stations. As he burst onto the bridge, his blood ran cold. The view screen was filled with the sight of Zorgan warships, their angular hulls bristling with weapons. They were everywhere, dropping out of hyperspace like a swarm of locusts. "What's our status?" Joseph barked, taking his seat in the command chair. His tactical officer shook his head, disbelief etched on his face. "They're hitting us everywhere. Sir, Earth, Betazoid, our colonies. It's a full-scale invasion." Joseph clenched his fists, his mind racing. How had the Zorgan managed this? They had been on the brink of defeat, their forces scattered. And yet here they were, launching an offensive that would have taken years to plan and coordinate. As reports flooded in, a chilling picture began to emerge. The Zorgan had infiltrated both human and Betazoid intelligence networks, planting spies and saboteurs at the highest levels. They had used the chaos of the war to position their fleets, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And strike they did. Human and Betazoid ships fell before the onslaught, outmatched and outmaneuvered at every turn. The Zorgans seemed to anticipate their every move, countering defenses and exploiting weaknesses with uncanny precision. Joseph gripped the armrests of his chair, his knuckles white. They were losing this fight, and losing it badly. If they didn't find a way to turn the tide and soon there might not be a human or Betazoid civilization left to save. A priority message blinked on his console. It was from Quasar. Joseph opened the channel, the Betazoid leader's face appearing on the screen. He looked haggard, his eyes haunted. "Joseph," Quasar said, his voice strained. "We're being slaughtered. The Zorgon. They're everywhere. We need to find out how they're doing this, and fast." Joseph nodded grimly. "Agreed. I'm assembling a joint task force, our best and brightest. We'll get to the bottom of this. Quasar, we have to." The task force convened on a secure station, hidden deep in the heart of an asteroid field. Human and Betazoid scientists pored over the data, searching for any clue to the Zorgon's newfound power. It was Quasar who found the lead they needed. A pattern in the Zorgon attacks, a series of coordinates that kept repeating. He brought it to Joseph, excitement and dread warring in his eyes. "A research station," Quasar said, pointing to a holographic map. "Heavily guarded, deep in Zorgon space. Whatever they're doing there, it's the key to all this." Joseph studied the map, his jaw set. A research station. It made sense. The Zorgon's sudden technological leap, their ability to strike with such precision. It had to be something new, something they had developed in secret.